welcome to Escaping the Chains podcast. I am your host, John Humphreys. We are brought to you today by Delivered Media, and we are here with Mike Henson Jr. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Apple Podcasts, or follow us on Spotify, please do, and give us feedback on there or on the social media pages. We're on TikTok, Facebook, and all of that fun stuff too. So we're glad to have you today. Today we're going to be talking with actually a really close friend of mine, and he's been a mentor too over my almost 13 years of recovery. So we're going to dig into some of the insight and the things that he's seen operating in the world of addiction and probation and stuff like that. So, Mike, how you doing today?
Man, doing good. It's good to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started.
Wow, you said that, and I was trying to figure out how even to introduce myself. So I wear a lot of different hats, I guess. Coordinate the drug court. I've been there since 2006.
In Grant County?
In Grant County, yep. I've been with probation in general since about 2000. Pastor here at the church. I did recovery. We were trying to guess. I always say 15 years. I think I was closer to 20. Mm-hmm. Just doing recovery.
The Celebrate Recovery and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So the Celebrate Recovery, it's an interesting thing. The Celebrate Recovery here that you were facilitating, I think I was sober 3 or 4 days when I first walked into that group. My friend Aaron Euler was like, you need to go. Right. We had Brian Beischer, some people I knew from high school were here. And I came in and first off, it changed my life because I think the lessons were cool, but to sit in a small group, right. I didn't have a lot of history doing that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But to hear that there's other people struggling, but there's also other people doing good. It was such a interesting dynamic, and I don't know how I felt. I didn't want to talk or anything when I left, but it was like I want to go back. Yeah. But it was such an interesting experience, and then then I had the opportunity to be in leadership with you in it, and we went through a lot of ups and downs. I had to step down from leadership for a little bit, but what was it? What is the thing you feel like you see? What's the biggest struggle people have coming into when they came in to Celebrate Recovery for the first time, or when they're coming into drug court? What are some of the things you see, like the first thing you've got to tackle a lot of times to even get started on a path to where we might be able to find freedom and sobriety?
Sure, I think probably, man, that's such a big question. I think probably just kind of that initial thing is just working through being overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. In recovery, oftentimes we say this in drug court a lot, we're just asking people to change everything. Yeah, right?
That's all. Just change
it all, And I used to say all the time, I think people, people that go through recovery in general are probably some of the bravest people I know, just having to work through all the stuff that they have to work through just to kind of make it and to get there. So I think it's just working through that initial being overwhelmed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard because for the first time in a long time, you're feeling again.
Right.
And that's one of the things I would tell people that first year. I would be going to Thanksgiving, I have a good family and I'd be excited, but even those kind of feelings are alien to you. It's like, I don't even know how to be happy. Right. I don't know how to look forward to things. I definitely don't know how to handle arguments and failure and being honest and all of that stuff. Because it's hard when your brain's been wired. I cannot tell people the complete truth.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the ups and downs. I think people get so used to the ups and downs, the highs, and then the crash, and then the high, then the crash. Mm-hmm. And so when life is just kind of happening, that doesn't feel right. Yeah. Because I'm not real high and I'm not real low. I'm just kind of there. And just kind of that overwhelming feeling of what am I supposed to feel? And all the feels are raw. Yeah. Because they're not dampened by the brain fog. And so it's such an interesting thing. I mean, it's so normal for people just to come in just being completely overwhelmed, and I think people that work with others in recovery miss that piece, and just that idea that people are going to be just super overwhelmed just getting started.
And I think that's a good note for families, because a lot of times families will reach out to me, and they want to understand, but it's like you're never really going to.
Right.
Like that's the first thing you have to understand is you're never going to understand, and then it's like, what is enabling, like all of these different things they have to navigate. Like, how do I know they're telling the truth this time? Because that's what I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, I don't know why people don't trust me. It's because it's the same thing. Like, we lied. I said I was doing good 475 times before I actually started doing good.
Right.
And for families, and I think also understanding like families and the people that are dealing with somebody that has been struggling with substance abuse, substance misuse, whatever you want to call it, they're traumatized.
Sure.
They can't sleep. They're worried about phone calls. So you have people get into the program. When you were with Celebrate Recovery, you dealt with a lot of different hurts, habits, hang-ups, like we talk about. What do you think is going through the work that people would do? What seemed to be the hardest part of like finding that freedom and walking through sobriety and recovery? What do you feel like people came up to you the most and were like, you don't have to say the most, but what was one of the common things that people would be like, hey, I'm struggling with this, or you would hear that somebody's struggling?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of it was kind of what you were saying. I think for most people, obviously struggling with the cravings, I mean, those kinds of things are normal and natural. But a lot of that, again, is that feeling of overwhelm sensation. I think, kind of going full circle to your first question or to your first comment about the groups, I think that's what made the group so powerful and so special.
Yeah.
Was that, when you're sitting in those groups, that helps you gain perspective for where you are, where you want to be, and why things feel weird and why things don't feel natural. And you're seeing somebody that's getting there where you want to be, but things still kind of feel weird and unnatural for them at times too. And, it's understanding on everybody's level, on the person in recovery's level, is understanding why people don't trust me or why people are still keep me at arm's length. They have their own trauma that I put them through.
Yeah.
And then the family members have the trauma and they're trying to figure that process out. And so, man, that's what made Celebrate Recovery. That's what makes, our church, I think, our church special, is the fact that we've allowed room for everybody to feel what they feel, and to process things through God and through Holy Spirit, and process that stuff, on their time, and to walk beside them as they do that. And so, I think that's been the beauty of it. But, I think that's always been the hardest part, is just, what's the next change I need to make? Obviously, they would know they needed to stop using, but then what do they put in that place? Because when we just stop using, when we stop hanging out with those friends, when we stop going to those places and those hangouts, and we interrupt our schedule, it creates that void.
Yeah.
So now what do I do? How do I fill my time? Who do I fill my time with? I used to tell people it's kind of like going back to junior high all over again.
Yeah.
The awkward feeling of, I got to go meet somebody new.
Yeah.
And figure out how to introduce myself when I don't even know who I am yet.
I hear so much, like people say, change my people, places, and things, but how do I change my people?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because where do I find the people that I'm supposed to be around? And it's really, like, it's easy to say, but you're not going to get along with everybody. Even if you're doing, it's not going to be people you want to hang out with necessarily. Right. It's literally like going through this, this, like you said, middle school kind of process again, of where you just bump into people. Some people, you click with, but most is just...
Yeah. And if you're really doing it right, probably the people you should be hanging out with are going to have nothing in common with who you've been.
Right. Exactly.
Because if I'm looking for people I have stuff in common with, I'm going to be right back into the same situations again. And so it just creates this real awkward space for about a year.
Yeah. So I can't imagine how many people have come to you with your job and with that have been in like a form of crisis and different levels. And I know because we have in every area we've worked together at least a little bit, probably more than that. So we've had similar people we work with and things like that. Right. And I think what's interesting is the calmness that you approach it with. Like, I've told you some stuff that I've done over the years, and your demeanor doesn't change. You know what I mean? And with me in my walk, that was so important. It wasn't like there wasn't repercussions for actions and things like that, mistakes I had made, but it was like, what's the next step? You know what I mean? Instead of like, I remember, I mean, we can go through, several things with memories coming back because over, like I said, almost 13 years, I've made a lot of mistakes. But I remember one of the best pieces of advice you gave me is because I wanted to say yes to everything. So it was like, these people want me over here, these people want me over here, and I was just saying yes to everything. And if I couldn't respond to a message on Facebook right away, I'd stress out, and you had talked to me about not growing weary in doing good. Can you break that down for the people to hear? Because I think that's some very important advice, because I got to a place, and some of the people that do the same type of work as me, it was almost nervous breakdown, whether it was health stuff, blood pressure stuff, that was, and for me, just feeling like I can't, you know what I mean? I got to a point of so overwhelmed, I almost just shut down.
Right. So I think one of the things, obviously John Bevere wrote a book, Not All Good Things Are God Things.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of that same kind of thought process a little bit. But Scripture says, not to grow weary in well-doing, as part of a scripture there. And, I think, with our personality, when we realize we've been forgiven much, and God has blessed us so much, and we realize how the mercy and grace on our life, sometimes the natural tendency is I have to repay, I have to pay for that. I have to repay that. I have to, I have to do everything I can to thank God for that, or to earn what He gave me for free. Right. And sometimes we in our mind, in our warped human mind, feel like we have to continue to go because of all the things He's done for me. So I got to go do all of these things for Him, whether He asked me to or not.
Right.
And so we can begin to do that. And even in our own personalities, sometimes I know, one of the things that personality traits that I've seen in common with a lot of people who are coming out of recovery is that personality, that it's hard for me just to sit and be still, because I've just been so used to hustling to get the next fix, and then I got to hustle again to get the next fix, and then we got to hustle again, and so we get used to always doing something, and so now that becomes I got to always do something for the Lord, and to the point that we begin to burn out. Our body can't continue to take that grind, because recovery in itself is a grind, but then to add trying to do things on top of that, and so we can grow weary, and it's doing things God didn't ask us to do. That's the difference, and I think that's becomes the learning process, is trying to learn what is God asking me to do, and what am I just trying to do out of my own strength and out of my own power.
And when we get moving like that, there's still work that God wants to do inside of us. And that's what's happened with me, is like, it's like I can tell you, and then you get it skewed. It's like I'm working my way into God's good graces. I'm working my way into this place in the kingdom. And that's not really how it works.
Right.
And so as I run, I can also avoid internal work that needs to be done. And I can feel it needs to be done, but it's like, well, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. If somebody comes to me and they're like, well, you probably need to work on healing in this department. Healing, whatever. I'm doing all of these things, but you can't outrun it. You cannot outrun that process.
So it becomes a defense mechanism for, our own insecurities, our own shame that we have to still deal with and work with. Look at all the good things I'm doing. And that kind of stuff. And I got to keep doing good things, because then ultimately we make it about us instead of about His work in us. And when it's about us, we got to keep doing things to continue to feel good about ourselves. And so it's that whole identity process and fighting for identity and who we are as we try to figure out who we are, in this new person. As we've changed everything, I've got to relearn who I am and who I am in Christ, and what my identity looks like. And so Yeah, it's all in there.
Well, I think if you're listening, this isn't like a condemnation type of
Right,
thing.
right.
You know what I mean? It's like a kind of a call up because this is, when I talk about stuff on here, I'm telling you stuff like, as well as anybody, like I've dealt with it and with some of the insecurities and the pain that I have went through and the insecurities that I carry. When I'm doing a lot, when people ask me about myself, I can say, my name's John. I do X, I do, Y, I do Z. I'm doing all of these things without really telling you anything about myself. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? I have broken pieces. I'm hurting. I have things that definitely need to heal. I have processes to go through.
Right.
But I'm telling you, it makes me feel better. Instead of saying, you know what I mean, just who I am, and if you ask me, how life is, and I always say, it's going great. I've got this going on, this going on, this going on. But the truth is, for me, all of those things going on was masking a lot of work. In just the last year,
Yeah.
I've sat and I've learned so many things inside of myself that needed healed, and then allowing myself to look at those things and process and work through those things instead of just telling everybody, yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm struggling a little bit with this, but really dig into, I feel like,
Right.
God's calling me closer to him, but also telling me there's things that can't come into this next season with you. So you're going to kind of be in the hallway, you know what I mean, until we work on these things that have been worked on for years.
For real, and I think that's the beauty of accountability and the beauty of having people walk the journey with you. As I tell people all the time, I used to say it. I think one of the first lessons in Celebrate Recovery was denial, but really it was the process of what's the truth. What's the brutal truth? We have to be brutally honest, walking in recovery, with ourselves and with others, and helping educate the people around us. This is what I'm going through. And understanding that it's normal and it's okay, but this is what it is. And so help me walk through this and help me process this, help me walk through the hallways and being honest about where I am in those hallways,
Yeah.
and those kinds of things too. And so if we can continue to do that, I think that opens the door for a deep level of recovery.
Yeah. And freedom. Yeah.
Right.
I think, yeah, definitely. That's where you find freedom. Because regardless in those situations, what it is it's my old flesh that likes to hide things and try to manage them and work on them myself.
Right.
And what I find is they become more broken.
Right.
They're harder to work on. And anything that I feel like I have to hide
Right.
is a problem.
Right.
So if you're wondering if you have a problem with food, video games, drugs, dating, any of that stuff, I can tell you right now, and I'm telling you from experience, if you're hiding it, you feel like you got to hide it, or you're sugarcoating it when you deliver, it's probably a problem.
Yeah.
It's something that needs worked on, and it's probably a problem.
Yeah. If your natural defense system is kicking in, then there's probably something there to take a peek at.
Yeah.
For real.
And when you start telling yourself, I've got this,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I've got this all figured out.
Yeah. There's your sign.
Yeah, I've done it 300 times. I've got this, I mean, when it with, dating and recovery and in the Christian world where I have, had a lot of challenges trying to figure that out.
Right.
And you get going and you start to lose discernment on your own. Things that used to bother you, you can do now.
Right.
And, you don't even feel convicted anymore because you've kind of severed that nerve, and we've talked about that on here before.
Right.
But, and then still after, many failures, and this isn't talking about people, I'm talking about internal failures in this department.
Right.
After so many failures, I still catch myself I've got this covered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't need to get and then the minute you get information, wise counsel, do some background checks, you realize my head is straight to the same cliff.
Right. There's all those sayings, I think, that we say in recovery, and sometimes we say them so much they start to lose their power. But people, places, things, stuff like that we just say in recovery. But again, recovery is not an individual sport either. They say, we say that a lot. Nobody recovers alone. and it's because of that. It's because of our natural tendencies, our natural defense mechanisms to try to hide and manipulate and to cover up and to try to see what, just kind of not let anybody know kind of really what's going on with us.
Yeah. So it's dangerous.
Makes it tough.
Yeah. At least in my life, it's
for
not
real.
a good thing.
For real.
How like working with the county and all of that stuff, what is it like with, operating as a man of faith and also operating as a man in the system? Like, what is that like, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It was definitely an interesting transition when I first started. I tell people all the time I still can't figure out how I ended up where I ended up. It's really kind of a weird story in and of itself. But yeah, I think it's just trying to be true to myself. I haven't really tried to just preach to everybody. I just try to, be who I am wherever I am and allow the Lord just to be who He is in me wherever I am. And it's kind of one of those things, show people, don't tell people kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's always kind of been something I've really tried to emulate in my life. And the professional side of things is how can I show people the love of God? They're gonna care more about that anyway than anything I could really tell them.
Yeah.
And feel that, and that'll be more powerful. So that's really kind of what I've tried to do. When I looked at recovery a long time ago, and I was just asking the Lord, how can I relate to the people you're going to bring to me? And He just, He began to reveal in me my own hurts and my own struggles and my own, hang-ups. And, we all know what it's like at that deeper level to feel hurt. To have struggles. We may have processed it a different way with other things other than drugs or alcohol or those kinds of things, but we can all relate at that deep level. We all know what it feels like to be abandoned by someone, to be backstabbed, to feel all of those feelings, and we coped however we coped. And so I think the Lord just kind of helped me begin to think about it, not looking necessarily at how we coped, but why we coped. And then how can I love people in that place, in that space, and share how He's helped me in those spaces in my life.
So, and then that's why a lot of times you'll be like, hey, do you feel like sharing? And sharing, your story, oh no, I don't think it'll have an impact on it. It's like it's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Your parents having trouble with your parents or your family.
Yeah.
Battling for your kids, spiritual lives and, sickness, loss, it all touches everything.
Right.
I can tell my story about Jesus Christ saved me from an addiction, and that can give people goosebumps and stuff, but not everybody's going to identify with that.
Right.
But they can, a lot of people can identify with Jesus Christ saved my life.
Yeah, 100%.
When I was broken, low, had nowhere else to go, they can identify with that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure, for real. I mean, I can take you to a spot on the campus at Indiana Wesleyan where I was lost. I mean, I just didn't know where I was, didn't know what God wanted to do with my life. I tell people a lot of times I felt like I was in a dark room with no windows, no doors, trying to figure out what's the way to go, what's the way out. And it was in those moments I just, I found myself on my knees just in prayer, real similar to your story.
Yeah.
Just kind of I got to the end of myself where, there was no more me figuring out what's next. And just, God, what do you want to do with me? I thought I knew, but I was quickly realizing what my plan wasn't His plan. It was a good plan, but it wasn't God's plan. And, then He just began to open some doors. And again, how I didn't even know what the probation department was when I filled out the application. Didn't know what they did. I had I'm just not from that world. Had no idea. I'd never interacted with probation. I just needed a job.
Yeah.
Right. And
were you married at the time?
I was. I don't know
so
why.
You had family business going on.
Yeah.
You had to start working, huh?
We got married, and I was making $250 a month. I don't know why she said yes. But I needed a job, and I needed to provide, and it was God just opening doors. He put me in contact with somebody, and Pastor Gary had just gotten a job there with the corrections department doing something different. And so I was like, is anybody hiring where you're at? And he's like, well, maybe. And so I just filled out an application there and a couple other places, and they called me back. And yeah, it's been a crazy road since.
Yeah. Well, your dad is a pastor.
Right.
So I imagine that's a pressure I never had.
Right.
And, I mean, we can like kid around or whatever, but I'm guessing that your dad being a fiery preacher too at that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, which we love, Pastor Mike, I like talking to him about the stories of him being drugged to old tent revivals and playing in the dirt. And it was like, there's miracles going on. He's like, I was a kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for real.
But I guess with, him being, of the magnitude he was and being, fiery and he's really good at preaching.
Right.
So being raised in that, was there a pressure on you to like, not that people put it on you, but like an internal pressure, like what is that like to be a pastor's kid? And your mom works at IWU, you know what I mean? So she's a strong force herself. So like you have these pillars in your house. Like did you have an internal pressure of like, I have to accomplish these things, or I have to be a pastor, or I have to be a professor, like, you know what I mean? Like that was what was modeled for you. How did you operate in that?
Yeah, it's different. It's different. If you don't know, you don't know. But I think there's always a little bit of pressure there. Obviously, a pastor is obviously judged oftentimes by his family.
Yeah.
We know that. Our church has been incredibly gracious, incredibly gracious to me and my sister growing up. I don't feel like anyone ever put pressure on me externally. Mm-hmm. But you just know. I mean, you're in church long enough, and you hear other people talk. I remember for the longest time, people would, they would find out I was a preacher's kid, they would ask me if I was one of those, because pastors' kids have a really bad reputation, and some of them, unfortunately, there's been some that's earned that.
Yeah.
And so growing up, I think for me it was more pressure on myself. I wanted to change that narrative.
Yeah.
For all the wrong reasons, but I wanted to change the narrative. It had nothing to do with my relationship with God or wanting God to be glorified in my life. I just didn't want to be known as one of those pastors' kids that's always in trouble.
Yeah.
The worst kid in the church, right? And I had people ask me that, are you the worst one are you the worst one here then? Kind of stuff, people that would come in, visitors, different things like that. And so, I just made up my mind I didn't want to be that, and so I tried really hard. Probably put more pressure on myself than I needed to, just to try to not be that person. But I also see God's grace in that, because he it protected me from a lot of things I could have got myself in trouble with.
Yeah.
And so he was so gracious to me, throughout my childhood and teen years, kept me out of a lot of trouble I could have got myself into real easy and real quick. I can, just looking back, see a couple. Obviously, I think we all have those instances where, man, I was right on the edge of probably getting into some big time trouble.
Yeah.
If it hadn't have been for the Lord and just those kinds of things. But yeah, I think there is always some of that pressure. I tell people all the time, I can't preach like my dad. I tried.
That's another thing I want to get into, because when you people get to tell in their testimonies, which you have to. I feel like it's a part of being saved, is like you got to tell people what God did for you.
Right.
And I think the thing, some of the best advice that I ever got was like, don't look to this person or that person and try to be like them. Mm-hmm. But that's really hard, because you go to sermons, you're like, oh, mm-hmm. But that's not what God's called me to. I'm not a preacher, but I do speak a lot.
Right.
And seeing people that are really good, and this can apply to anything in life, is like, you see somebody and you're like, that's amazing. Right. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get to that place, or I'll never get to that place of where that person's at. And that can be at work and, sports and just, in how somebody walks and operates.
Right.
But with like the preaching thing or, that type of stuff, that is a lot of a lot of working out. Like you
Right.
have got to learn to be comfortable with who God made you to be,
Right.
or you're just going to be mimicking. And so that's something. That's another thing, because I know we've talked about it. So with your you being more calm. You know what I mean? And your dad being not calm. You know what I mean? When he comes into the barber shop, you know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
hey, Brother John, how's it going? You know,
Yeah.
like this. So two totally different personalities.
Yeah.
So you're coming up, and at some point you realize I'm called to preach on some level. You get what I'm saying? You know, we have a team. There's a team of preachers now, but at one point he was the pastor. So you watch him, and you watch the way people respond to him, and you watch his energy, and you know what I mean, even his enunciation, like all of these things.
Right.
And then you're coming up, and you're starting to, get your bite at the apple, whatever you want to call it, and you're starting to share. How hard is it to not try to just be like him, especially having the exact same name?
Yeah, no, for real. It was really difficult, you know, and discouraging at times. You know, 18, 19, 20, starting to, speak a little bit, and trying to figure out who I was and who I am, And in my head, I try, as I was prepared, it sounds like who you want to emulate,
Yeah.
right? Then I'd get up there and get ready to speak, man, and it was nothing like him. And oftentimes just discouraged, there were times like that. And again, I think it speaks to having mentors and people walk beside you. Because I can remember probably one of the most instrumental points in my life was I was at a conference or a meeting, and I was hanging out with Pastor Gary Dalton. He was my youth leader when I was growing up, youth pastor and pastor, and being best friends with his son Nathan and Todd. He was almost like he's a second father to me, really.
Yeah.
It's during some of those instrumental times when, obviously we all go through those times when our father, is our dad. And so we're not really listening to him. His voice has become common, and we think we know better, and so we have to find another voice. And so Gary was kind of that for me for a while, and has been that for a lot of my life, just another voice that I listen to that guides and directs me. But we were sitting there talking. He was just with me, and just sharing about that struggle, that very struggle. Well, at that point in time at Indiana Wesleyan, when I was trying to figure out what God was calling me to do, and I felt that call to ministry, and I felt it very clear. I thought I knew what it looked like.
Yeah.
But I knew that I was going to be a minister, and God was calling me to that. And so through that process, then it wasn't looking anything like my dad. He has that, very big personality, and I don't. And so, and when him preaching and me preaching are on very opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And so I was just kind of figuring that out. And Gary, one time he said, look, man, you gotta be you. Just be who you are, who God created you to be. And man, that has just resonated. So simple and obvious, but it was the word I needed in that very moment of my life. I was probably 21, 22 at the time. And it was exactly what I needed when I needed to hear it. And to this day, when I get ready to speak at any level, though I hear his words in my mind say, man, just be you. You don't need to be anybody else. You're not trying to be your dad. You're not trying to be, any of the other people that get up and speak. Because man, our lineup is amazing, and I just need to be who I am.
Yeah.
And do it the way God gave it to me, and trust Him with everything else. And so that's been the biggest thing for me in navigating that process.
Yeah, and that's a good message.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it translates to a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. Because we do, you know what I mean? We look up to people, and,
right.
and that's just human nature. And,
right.
And you can take things from them. I've learned so much from hearing all of you, and, and you too, like all of these things. I've learned a lot, but right. also managing and remembering, like, God's made me this weird little way that John is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I wish I could sing.
Right, yeah,
I wish I could sing. I wish I could. RJ can sing.
RJ can sing.
RJ can sing. Yeah, I wish I could sing. I wish sometimes I had those fiery hallelujahs that just belt out, and you're like, gosh, you had to be trained, just like,
Right.
hallelujah.
Yeah.
And everybody feels it, but I don't.
Yeah.
I tell funny little stories, and I break things down biblically in a way that, I understand them, and I
Right.
just, I'm a messenger, and that's such an honor,
Right. 100%. I think that's the whole battle, though, and I think that's been the whole thing when we talk about recovery, when we just talk about life in general. I think that the enemy of our soul wants to get to is just that warped sense of who we are, and get us fighting that identity and finding identity in other things, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be recovery, whether it be our jobs, whether it be whatever. What we do and can do, our gifts, our talents, or whatever, finding identity in that instead of our identity in who God is and who He created us to be, and any way to warp that. And so, but man, when we can unlock being comfortable with God, who God created us to be, the way He created us to be it just opens up the door for just peace and joy and those kinds of things.
The enemy's been trying to strip us of our identity since the garden.
Since the very beginning.
Yeah, if he can manipulate you into believing you're not who God created you to be,
Right.
he has you confused. He'll start to have you alone. You'll be easily offended.
Right.
You'll be chasing mantles and affirmation. And again, that's stuff that I've personally had to battle with.
Right.
You'll be looking to fill
Right.
your needs and those things where you lack, instead of getting them from God, you want to get them from people, or you get them from you just do these things because once your identity is stripped and you forget who you are. Recently, in the last few months, I was sitting on the porch, and it's like I get to where I just try to operate these things. It's like, okay, I just got to manage this and manage that. And I have been saved for a long time, and I don't know if this battle is one that's going to be won on this earth. You know what I mean? Right. It's like I got to stop myself from micromanaging. I got to stop myself from figuring everything out. And I was out there doing it, and I just heard like God was just saying, remember who I called you to be.
Right.
Remember who you are. And then I was having a phone call with actually Cody Knuckles, and I was kind of going through some stuff. This was a while back, but I was going through some stuff. And he was like, you're John, like, when did you forget who you were? Do you remember who you are?
Right.
And sometimes it just takes that. Like, if you're listening or watching, do you remember who you are?
Right.
When God, when the Spirit of God fell on you and you felt safe and you felt understood and you felt loved, like, that's who you are.
Right.
And if you don't forget that, like, I am out here I'm supposed to be swinging a sword.
Right.
Not huddled, protecting and covering and doing all of these things, that, are not my personality and not what I've called to do.
Yeah. But I think also, John, I think those things I think that's a natural thing we all go through, and I think even looking back in the Bible, I think that was the purpose when God would tell the children of Israel to put up memorial stones or put up these things of remembrance. That way you can tell these stories, but you can not only remember the stories, but you can also remember who you are and who I called you to be. Right, and I think we need people and we need places in our life just to kind of always remind us, this is who you are. This is who God called you to be. This is, and I think that battle is one we always will fight on some level, and just need those constant reminders of, God's got me. What does He want me to do?
Yeah.
What is it that I'm supposed to be doing? What has He called me to do? What are the God things in my life when things start to get out of control? That's when we got to stop and it's like, okay, what is God calling me to do right now? What is, if I don't know, then I'm not going to do anything until I figure that part out.
Yeah.
Right.
It was so easy for me when I was staying at the motel, living out of a backpack, to live recklessly for God.
Right.
To abandon whatever and chase what He. Now, like I trusted Him with this process with my daughters, and I got custody.
Right.
And you were there for that. Like, supposed to be impossible, a long process. It was a battle, but He came through when it was all said and done. And now, in my comfort, I may feel him like, hey, you might need to make an adjustment with the job. Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
I just got to a place where, you know what I mean? I can
Yeah.
budget and things seem to be going pretty well. But isn't it funny, like how the world works is like we get into comfort. I would have never thought that comfort would be my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know me, like that would have
Yeah.
that would have not crossed your mind. Like, he's going to get comfortable one day,
Yeah.
and not want to give things up because of comfort.
Yeah.
And here I am, like being completely transparent. I'm here in this season right now, and you feel God tugging on it. It's like, God, I guess faith is a funny thing because, God, I want you to show me.
Yeah.
What you're pulling me to before I let go. I can't hold on and move forward,
Yeah.
but I really try sometimes. It's like, God, can you, tip me off a little bit.
Exactly.
Tell me, give me a little idea of how long we're going to be eating macaroni and cheese before,
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. It's, we're people, it's people. And, we make fun of the children of Israel all the time in the wilderness for all of their, complaining, after seeing all the things God did.
Yeah.
And then to still, fall into that humanity. And that's who we are. And I'm grateful for his grace.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That walks us through that, even when, we have those times where we forget who we were and who we are and, and how God wants us to be. And he's gracious enough to bring us back, And so I'm so grateful for that. And, but yeah, we do that. It's just.
They saw some miracles too, but so have we.
Yeah, 100%.
So you read it, you're like, these knuckleheads. But the truth is like, I'm a knucklehead too.
Yeah.
I've seen God move, like some of the things I have seen, and
it's crazy.
Yeah, some of the miracle that I am, and still, like, I'll read the Bible, and I've gotten better at it because I ain't calling anybody a knucklehead in there anymore. You know what I mean? Because I've done just about everything they've all done now.
Right.
But you read that, like when you first get saved, you're like, what was wrong with those people?
Yeah.
You start to get a little bit of comfort, even if it's just, even if it's just eating grass. If I have grass to eat, then I'm good.
Right.
I'd rather keep eating grass than move on to someplace God's calling me where I don't know.
Right.
That's unfamiliar. I'd rather stay in this familiar, mess, this pig pen, whatever you want to call it. Stay here, at least get scraps, and know that I at least get scraps instead of walking towards a good father that's probably got something better than scraps.
Yeah, that's the dangerous place, for recovery and for a lot of us. We get to that, we get to this place where things are good and have been good for a while, then we forget what got us here. The meetings, and that's why I try, when people are graduating drug court, one of the last things I try to tell them is, what got you here will keep you here.
Yeah.
What gets us to these places will keep us here. And so it's always, being humble enough and willing enough to take a look back and say, okay, where have I strayed and how do I get back to that? What got me to these places with the Lord, what got me to these places in recovery are the things that's going to keep me there. So where did I get off track and how do I get back to that?
Yeah.
Whether it's that meeting or whether that's the circle, whether it's that church, or whether it's that devotion time, or whether it's that accountability, or, when's the last time I talked to a sponsor? Or when's the last time I talked to accountability? When's the last time I showed up in a meeting? And just kind of when I start to feel myself, straying off a little bit or getting offline, I can tell it in me when I'm starting to kind of get off of my trajectory.
Yeah.
Okay. So what got me to where I enjoyed myself with the Lord? What do I need to do to get back to that?
Yeah.
What did I stop doing? Usually it's because I stopped doing something.
Right.
Right. I stopped, reading in the morning or praying, or I stopped showing up here, showing up there. I thought something was good, but it wasn't God.
Yeah.
And it pulled me off track. And so I got to get back to what was God calling me to do? What's the last thing he told me to do? I'm gonna go back and do that and figure out where I went off track.
Yeah. Is it good or is it God?
Is it good or is it
God? Yeah. So I appreciate you coming in for the conversation.
Yeah, for real.
We have had so many, and I've always appreciated it, and I appreciate you. You've had such an impact on the direction of my life, and a lot of people don't know, but when it comes to the speaking and storytelling and stuff that people hear from me, a lot of that came from cutting my teeth in Celebrate Recovery, where you gave me a lot of grace, there were times after I was done talking, I was like, well, that might be it for me. But yeah, and I appreciate that. So as we close out, where can people, find you? Where do you operate? And, what's next?
Yeah. So I'm usually either downtown at Probation.
They don't want to see you there.
They probably don't want to see me there. My door is always open, but you probably don't want to see me there. At least not in a professional manner.
Right.
And here at the church, I mean, I'm usually around Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays, hanging out there at the church doing something in the evenings. So always kind of around. I'm not exactly sure what's next. I've really been on this this thing for family, just really wanting to help create family within the church, and so just really trying to connect with people, just creating organic conversations, kind of like we've had over the years, just with couples and people. Just kind of, God's been so good to me, and so good to me and Tanya and my wife and and our family, and just trying to organically just create conversations and build family, and how can we pass down some of the things we've learned and gathered over the years, and what can we learn from just sharing a meal or hanging out with others. And so that's kind of been on my heart and on my plate the last couple of months, is just kind of just trying to build family and recreate family now that my kids are older and have moved out. And so it's kind of, we used to have family nights. Me and my wife have talked about, we used to have family nights with the kids, and so now it's kind of recreating family nights, but inviting some of the family in, just to kind of do some of that. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. So,
and the church is Bethel Worship Center, 38th Street. I don't know the address, but it's across from the VA.
Across from the VA, 1715?
17 something, across from the VA. 1750.
East 38th Street.
Also, they have Fanning the Flame coming up.
Yeah.
That's February. What's the date on that, RJ?
So 21st, 2nd, 23rd.
Yeah, it'd be Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. So super excited for that. Pastor Emmanuel's coming from Mexico. He was here with us last year, just moving in some amazing things.
Is he the one that talked on Friday night? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is good.
Yeah, so he'll be back. He'll be back on the Friday night. So doing our Friday night thing, and then I think we have Pastor Mark Casto from Atlanta, maybe. I think coming for Saturday and Sunday.
Cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. But man, I've been watching the podcast. It's been really cool. Yeah. So appreciate being on.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad to have you on. It takes me, I usually do last minute, so I'll say I'm going to get a hold of you 2 months, and it might be like 10 days before. I'm like, hey, what are you doing Friday or Thursday? Well, we appreciate you. You've really had an impact on my life, and I know you've had an impact on a lot of people, like working in this, operating in the world that I do, and so I think with that, we're going to close out. So we thank you for listening to Escaping the Chains podcast. Please give us a follow on wherever you listen to your podcast. We want to thank RJ and the Delivered Media team. He's the man behind the curtain, and he's the one that makes this happen.
Yeah, so good.
And check out Bethel's page so you can see when all your updates on Fanning the Flame and everything else they have going on. And we're going to actually close out with the song from BWC Music. And we will hear you guys, or we will actually talk to you guys next Monday.